fog rolled over the ancient courtyards of Cambridge like a living creature, swallowing lamplight and muffling hurried footsteps. Inside St. Anselm College, the vaulted lecture hall lay silent, too silent for a night that should have echoed with applause. Instead, a single shape slumped over the lectern, glasses cracked, chalk dust scattered like snowfall around him. Chapter 1. The Lecture Hall of Echoes. The fog that evening clung to Cambridge like a second skin, dense, silvery, alive with the breath of winter. It wove through the ancient courtyards of St. Anselm College, curling around archways and creeping up the stone walls with the stealth of a watchful predator. Lamps along the cobbled paths struggled against the gloom, their halos of amber light dissolved into the mist before reaching the ground. The bells of Great St. Mary's tolled the late hour, their iron voices muffled beneath the heavy air. A cold, quiet unease coated the university like frost. The silence inside the main quadrangle was broken only by the slow, deliberate footsteps of Hercule Poirot. He strode through the fog with precise little steps, his polished shoes tapping rhythmically, a metronome against the stillness. His immaculate overcoat was buttoned to the throat, and from beneath the sharp crease of his hat brim, his dark eyes glimmered with suspicion. To most, the night would seem merely oppressive. To Poirot, it thrummed with the unmistakable tension of wrongdoing. He paused before the looming doors of the Hawthorne Lecture Hall, their carved oak panels rising 3 times his height. The building's medieval stones were slick with mist. A draught seeped from beneath the threshold, cold, strange, aromatic with both dust and something acrid. Poirot inhaled gently, and his moustache quivered. "Curious," he murmured. A constable stepped forward from the shadows. "Monsieur Poirot, Inspector Jameson's waiting inside." Poirot inclined his head. "Merci, mon ami." The constable pushed open the heavy door. It groaned with an old man's weariness and revealed a cavernous darkness beyond. Poirot stepped inside. The lecture hall was a cathedral of scholarship. Vaulted ceiling, tall stained-glass windows depicting scholars long dead, and rows upon rows of wooden benches worn smooth by decades of restless students. The only light came from several electric lamps Inspector Jameson had hastily positioned, their glow failing to banish the deep swallowing shadows at the far ends of the room. Yet, even from the doorway, Poirot could sense it. The stillness of death lingering like smoke after a snuffed candle. Jameson stood near the lectern, arms folded awkwardly across his chest. "Evening, Poirot," he said. "Looks straightforward enough. Heart attack, maybe. Dropped dead right in the middle of reviewing his notes for the big lecture tonight." Poirot's eyes followed Jameson's gesture. There, slumped over the lectern as though in exhausted prayer, lay Professor Lionel Ashcroft. The beam of light caught the professor's silver hair, the cracked lenses of his spectacles, the deep lines etched into his forehead. One arm hung limply at his side, the fingers curled inward. A sheet of paper was clutched tightly in his other hand, wrinkled and torn. Chalk dust coated the lectern and lay scattered across the floor like fallen snow. A glass lay shattered nearby, its fragments glittering faintly. Poirot approached with slow, reverent steps, as though entering sacred ground. "Do not move him yet," Poirot said softly. Jameson exhaled impatiently. "He's been dead for hours. Don't see the harm." "The harm," Poirot replied, "is that your eyes do not see what mine see." Jameson opened his mouth to retort, but thought better of it. Poirot leaned closer, fingertips pressed together. "Observe the posture," he said, "the rigidity. The fingers are drawn inward, unnatural for sudden collapse. And this line on the floor. His cane tapped a faint, nearly invisible groove etched into the dust, a track no wider than a thread. Something was dragged from this very place, something metallic perhaps. Jameson blinked. Could just be the janitor's chalk trolley. Poirot shook his head. No, this is not random. It is deliberate. He moved to the chalkboard behind the lectern. Several words had been hastily written and then smeared, as if the professor had attempted to wipe the board but lost strength halfway. Only fragments remained. The truth beneath. Foundation. Danger. With 2 gloved fingers, Poirot lifted the torn page from the professor's grip. The handwriting was frantic, a departure from the scholar's normally elegant script. Poirot, do you think he was trying to write a message? Jameson asked. Poirot considered. Perhaps, but more likely he fought for something, an idea, a discovery he feared would be silenced. He crouched beside the shattered glass. Water, he murmured, or so it appears. And yet, note the slight cloudiness at the bottom of the shards. Something dissolved, perhaps? Jameson sighed. Poison! Poirot stood, his gaze sweeping the hall with sharpened alertness. No, Inspector. If poison was used, it was not in the water. The pattern of the dust around the lectern, the disrupted air, something else occurred. He straightened suddenly. Tell me, mon ami, who discovered the body? Jameson grimaced. A student porter. Heard nothing unusual. Claims he was locking up for the night. Ashcroft never showed up for his lecture, so the porter went looking. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And who last spoke with the professor before his death? Jameson checked his notebook. Dr. Miriam Vale, fellow historian. They argued earlier today over research disputes. Poirot made a soft sound. Half thoughtful hum, half disapproval. Academic disputes, he said, can be more passionate than wars. His gaze shifted again, drifting across the lecture hall, absorbing every detail. The scuffed edge of a bench, a chalk line that seemed too straight, too purposeful. An open window with the curtain fluttering slightly, though the night was still. Poirot turned to Jameson. Would you not say, Inspector, that something is missing? Jameson glanced around. Like what? Poirot gave a delicate shrug. That is what we must discover. He moved toward the open window. The air was frigid, biting. The lock showed no signs of force, yet the sill bore faint scratches. Poirot leaned forward, inspecting the stone with a small penlight he produced from his coat. Tiny metal shavings clung to the edge. Jameson peered over his shoulder. What do you make of it? Poirot slipped the evidence into a small envelope. Something was affixed here. Something small, mechanical, requiring tension, and it was removed hastily. Jameson frowned. You're suggesting a device? Poirot did not answer directly. Instead, he turned his attention back to the chalkboard. His fingers traced the faint smudge of chalk dust at the base, then followed the pattern upward until he stopped at a spot near the centre. Here, he whispered. Jameson squinted. What am I supposed to see? Poirot tapped the board gently. A speck of white fell. It shimmered oddly, not like chalk, but like powder, luminous under the lamp's glow. Not chalk, Poirot said, something mixed with it. Something meant to become airborne when disturbed. Jameson's face paled. You think the board was rigged? Poirot nodded. A fine powder, spread across the surface, invisible in dim light. When the professor wrote upon it, the movement dispersed the particles. If inhaled, Jameson swallowed. Poison. Poirot gave a slow, solemn nod. A subtle one, difficult to detect, fast-acting. The inspector ran a hand through his hair. Christ! Poirot stepped closer to the lectern again. He traced the path of the chalk dust on the floor, following it to the faint groove he had noticed earlier. The groove led downward, to where the baseboard met the floor. He knelt. The floorboards beneath the lectern appeared slightly raised, their edges uneven. He pressed a finger against one, then another. One shifted noticeably. "A false panel," Poirot murmured. He pressed harder. The panel clicked open, revealing a shallow cavity just large enough to conceal a small mechanism, but it was empty. "Someone removed it swiftly after the murder," Poirot said. Jameson swore under his breath. "So the killer came back." Poirot stood slowly, allowing the magnitude of the conclusion to settle between them. "Yes," he said softly. "Our murderer returned. Perhaps even watched the body discovered. Perhaps they are still near, waiting to see whether their crime will be uncovered." A sudden sound echoed from the corridor. A soft, hurried footstep. Poirot's head snapped toward the sound. His posture sharpened like a blade drawn from its sheath. "Inspector," he whispered, "we are not alone." Jameson drew his torch and moved toward the doorway. Poirot followed, every sense alert, each step measured and silent. The corridor outside was long and dimly lit, lined with old portraits whose painted eyes seemed to follow the men as they advanced. The fog pressed against the windows like a living presence, and the faint scent of wet stone drifted through the hall. Poirot stopped abruptly. "There," he said, pointing toward a shadow near the end of the corridor. "Too thick, too still." Jameson stepped forward. "Who's there? Show yourself." The shadow shifted, and a figure detached itself from the darkness. Poirot's breath held for a moment. A tall silhouette, cloaked, moving backward. Then, with startling speed, the figure turned and fled down the corridor. Jameson cursed and sprinted after them. Poirot followed at a brisk pace, though he knew he could not match the inspector's speed. As he rounded the corner, he heard a door slam in the distance, followed by the echo of hurried footsteps descending a staircase. Jameson returned moments later, panting. "They're gone," he said, "vanished into the damn fog." Poirot did not look disappointed. He gazed instead into the darkness, his expression unreadable. "To flee," he murmured, "is to confess the existence of fear, and the guilty, they fear the little grey cells." He adjusted his tie, then turned back toward the lecture hall. "Come, Inspector, our night's work is only beginning." The fog outside thickened, pressing against the glass as though eager to swallow the truth. Within those ancient stone walls, secrets slept uneasily, ready to rise again under Poirot's relentless scrutiny. And somewhere in the darkness, the murderer watched with growing dread as Hercule Poirot began to unravel the first thread of their crime. Chapter 2. The Faculty of Secrets. The senior common room of St. Anselm College was a chamber steeped in history and resentment. The walls were panelled in dark oak, scarred with the ghosts of past arguments. The air carried a faint aroma of pipe smoke, leather, and the stale echo of academic pride. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, its flames clawing at the cold mist that seeped beneath the heavy leaded windows. It should have been a place of collegial warmth. Instead, it felt like a court awaiting judgment. Dr. Miriam Vale stood at the far end of the room, bathed in the warm flicker of firelight. Her posture was rigid as a tuning fork, her silhouette sharp against the glow. She held a cup of tea, though the tremor in her fingers made the rim clink softly against the saucer. The sound repeated in an irregular rhythm, like a heartbeat betraying a concealed panic. Poirot entered with measured precision, his gaze sweeping the room. He paused briefly at the threshold, allowing the gay atmosphere to settle around him like a cloak. Mademoiselle Vale, he said gently, I'm so very sorry we meet under such unfortunate circumstances. She turned. Her eyes were red, not from crying, Poirot noted, but from lack of sleep and strain. Behind those eyes simmered an intelligence that vibrated at the edge of breaking. Monsieur Poirot, she replied stiffly, I expected you would arrive eventually. Cambridge attracts its share of mysteries, but murder is a vulgarity we prefer to imagine reserved for less scholarly places. Poirot inclined his head. Alas, death shows little respect for scholarship. The fire popped softly, and the room seemed to contract around them. I hear you were the last person to speak with Professor Ashcroft, Poirot said. A muscle twitched in Miriam's jaw. If by speaking you mean him shouting insults while I defended my life's work, then yes. You refer to his accusations, Poirot said, that your research notes were, shall we say, borrowed without permission. Her laugh was sharp and brittle. Borrowed? He stole them, Monsieur Poirot. Entire passages from my monograph. Years of research, lifted wholesale for his book on the Tudor archives, and all while maintaining the facade of collegial mentorship. Poirot observed her carefully. Anger, yes, but beneath it, humiliation. A wound deeper than academic theft. And tonight, he continued, he intended to reveal findings taken from you. Findings he had no right to, Miriam snapped. I threatened to challenge him before the lecture, publicly, if necessary. Poirot raised an eyebrow. Such an accusation could ruin a respected scholar. She met his gaze without flinching. He deserved ruin. Poirot stepped forward, examining the sleeve of her blue wool coat. A faint smear of white dust marred the fabric, too granular, too dense to be ordinary chalk. You have been in the lecture hall, he said. Of course, she replied. I teach there. Everyone does. You left in a hurry. She hesitated. Perhaps. Poirot tapped the dust gently. This chalk is unusual. It contains a substance that does not belong in a classroom. A powder, chemical in nature. Miriam's eyes widened. Are you accusing me? I didn't kill him. Poirot's tone remained calm. I accuse no one. I only observe. And the facts, they speak softly but insistently. Your coat tells a story. She set her teacup down with a trembling hand. I confronted Lionel this afternoon. Yes, I did. But I did not follow him to the hall tonight. I left immediately after our argument. Poirot did not contradict her, though his silence carried weight. Dr. Vale, he said, forgive me for insisting, but the matter of your research, was it enough to drive you to desperation? Her lips parted, then closed again. She turned away, staring into the fire. Do you know what it feels like? She whispered, to dedicate 10 years of your life to discovering a truth buried in dust and archives, to spend your youth repeating the same meticulous work day after day, chasing a glimmer of knowledge, and then have someone snatch it from your hands? Poirot waited. It is a kind of grief, she continued, a theft of identity. And Lionel did it with such smug delight, as though it were a game. Poirot nodded. And yet, mademoiselle, anger does not prove guilt. She swallowed hard. I went to see him earlier. I told him I would expose him. He laughed at me. Poirot paused. And after this exchange? I went to my office, she said. I couldn't bear the thought of hearing his lecture. I worked alone until after 9. A solitary alibi, Poirot said gently, is no alibi at all. Her eyes hardened. Believe what you will, Monsieur Poirot. I did not kill Lionel Ashcroft. I only wished I had the courage to ruin him while he still breathed. A movement at the doorway interrupted them. Sir Rowan Ellery, Dean of St. Anselm, swept into the room like an actor entering stage left, dramatic, dignified, and faintly self-important. His academic robes swayed behind him, their velvet panels catching the firelight. "Dr. Vale," he said with polite disapproval, "I trust you are cooperating." "As best one can when accused," she replied icily. Poirot stepped forward. "Dean Ellery, a pleasure. I had been hoping to speak with you." Ellery nodded curtly. "Monsieur Poirot, your reputation precedes you. This institution is," he cleared his throat, "in turmoil. The sudden death of Professor Ashcroft has shaken the foundations of the college. Our donors, our students, we must tread carefully." Poirot smiled thinly. Truth, Dean Ellery, has little patience for careful treading. Ellery's expression soured. "I simply hope we may proceed without scandal. St. Anselm has weathered centuries of academic excellence. It cannot be marred by wild accusations." Poirot looked mildly amused. "And yet, I fear the scandal has already arrived." Ellery exhaled sharply, then approached the fireplace. "A tragedy. Lionel was brilliant, though occasionally abrasive." "Abrasive?" Miriam muttered. "He was a tyrant." Ellery ignored her. "We must handle matters delicately. The police are already here. Press inquiries will follow. A scandal could—" Poirot raised a finger. "Forgive me, Dean Ellery, but murder is rarely delicate, and your concern for reputation, while admirable, must not impede the investigation." The Dean's jaw tightened. Poirot continued. "Tell me, Sir Rowan, you and Professor Ashcroft, were you acquainted beyond professional necessity?" Ellery hesitated. "We worked together, certainly. But Lionel was as difficult. He criticized nearly every administrative decision I made." Poirot noted the stiffness in the Dean's shoulders. Attention poorly, concealed. "And earlier today," Poirot asked, "you had no disagreements with him? None worth mentioning?" Miriam's sharp laugh cracked through the air. "Oh, please. Lionel humiliated you in front of the faculty council last week. He accused you of mismanaging funds for the archives restoration." Ellery's face darkened. "Dr. Vale, I advise you to—" "Enough," Poirot said mildly. "Let us focus on facts." Behind them, the door opened again. A college servant, young, pale, trembling, stepped inside. "Sir, Dean Ellery," the boy stammered. Ellery turned sharply. "What is it?" The servant swallowed hard. It's Professor Ashcroft's office, sir. Someone broke in." The words hung in the air like a struck bell. Poirot's back straightened. Jameson, who had been lingering near the hall entrance, stepped into the room with sudden alertness. "When?" Jameson demanded. "Just now," the servant said. "I was making rounds and saw the door ajar. Everything inside. It's a mess." Poirot moved toward the doorway immediately. "Lead the way, mon ami." As he passed Miriam Vale, he paused. "Do not leave the college grounds." Her chin lifted defiantly. "I will do no such thing." Poirot nodded once, then followed the servant down the dim corridor. Behind him, Miriam's teacup rattled once more against the saucer, this time not from trembling, but from something colder. Fear. The corridor leading to Ashcroft's office was long, narrow, and lined with portraits of former deans, their painted eyes shadowed by centuries of candle soot. The gas wall lamps flickered weakly, their flames bending as though disturbed by some invisible presence. Poirot walked with sharp, brisk steps, his mind assembling possibilities with lightning precision. "Was the door locked when you last made rounds?" he asked the servant. "Yes, sir. I swear it was." "And now it stands open," Poirot murmured. "Most intriguing." Jameson fell into stride beside him. "Do you think the murderer returned to cover their tracks?" Poirot pursed his lips. Perhaps. Or perhaps to retrieve something left behind. A mistake is often more damning than the crime itself. They reached the door, indeed ajar, swinging slightly with a faint creak, as though recently disturbed. Poirot motioned for silence. He pushed the door open. Ashcroft's office lay in ruins. Bookshelves had been ransacked, their contents flung across the floor. Manuscripts were torn apart, parchment scattered like dry leaves in a storm. Cabinets stood open, their drawers gutted. A chair lay overturned, and the professor's prized collection of antique quills littered the carpet like broken bones. The chaos was too theatrical, Poirot thought. Too eager to declare itself. "Someone tore this place apart," Jameson muttered. Poirot shook his head. "Non, mon ami, someone wants us to believe that." He walked slowly through the wreckage, his fingertips lightly brushing surfaces, his eyes scanning every pattern of disturbance. "Look here," he said softly, pointing to a cabinet whose lock had been expertly picked. This was opened with precision, not violence, and yet the rest of the room, he gestured broadly, a performance. Jameson frowned. So, what were they looking for? Poirot knelt beside the desk. A rectangle of dust-free wood marked an empty space. "A book was taken," he said, "recently, and with great care." He lifted a loose page from the desk. A torn scrap. The edges scorched lightly, as if someone had attempted to burn it, but stopped midway. Only a few words remained. If discovered, everything ends. Jameson swore quietly. Everything ends? What the devil was Ashcroft working on? Poirot did not answer. He traced the torn fibres thoughtfully, then slipped the page into his pocket. A rustle at the doorway made both men turn. Ned Pembroke, Ashcroft's graduate student, hovered there, tall, gaunt and pale, with dark circles beneath his eyes that hinted at many sleepless nights. "I saw the lights," Ned said shakily. "Is something wrong?" Poirot regarded him coolly. "Monsieur Pembroke, a broken door, a destroyed office, and a dead professor. Quelle surprise! Something is wrong." Ned swallowed. I can help." Poirot stepped closer. "Tell me, young man, what was your relationship with the professor?" Ned twisted his hands. "Complicated." Jameson raised an eyebrow. "Meaning?" "He was demanding," Ned said. "He expected everything, absolute perfection. If I made the slightest mistake, he'd threaten to fail me. He said he'd reconsider writing my reference letter for Oxford." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "A powerful leverage." Ned looked away. "But I never wanted him dead." "And tonight?" Poirot asked. "Where were you this evening?" "In the library," Ned said quickly. "Studying, alone. A convenient solitude," Poirot murmured. Ned stepped inside the room, staring at the devastation. "My God, who would do this?" Poirot observed him closely. On Ned's cuff, dark ink stains, fresh. "Have you been writing this evening?" Poirot asked. I was taking notes." Poirot's gaze drifted to the fireplace. A charred fragment of parchment lingered in the grate, half consumed by flames. "Did you attempt to burn something?" Poirot asked. Ned's eyes widened. "No!" Poirot retrieved the fragment delicately with tongs. The ink was familiar, Ashcroft's hand. Jameson's voice was low. Maybe the killer came here to destroy whatever Ashcroft was working on. Poirot nodded. Or to find something Ashcroft discovered, something dangerous. He stood, dusting off his knees. "Inspector," he said, "this is no burglary. This is a message." A sudden, piercing scream cut through the corridor. A sharp, terrified cry that froze the blood. Poirot spun toward the door. "Mon Dieu," he whispered. "Someone is in grave distress." Jameson bolted, calling orders to constables as he raced down the corridor. Poirot followed swiftly, his coat billowing behind him like a dark shadow. Somewhere in the cloisters, a woman was crying out in fear, and Poirot had already begun to suspect who. Chapter 3. Shadows in the Archive. The next morning dawned pale and listless, the sky bruised with lavender clouds drifting low over Cambridge. Poirot walked briskly across the frosted courtyard of St. Anselm College, his breath forming small disciplined clouds in the chilled air. Students hurried past him with downcast eyes, whispering about the professor's death, their fear spreading like an invisible contagion through the ancient campus. Poirot felt the tension before he even touched the library door. Inside, the vast archive room awaited, silent, towering, oppressive in its stillness. Shelves rose from floor to ceiling in an intimidating labyrinth of leather-bound volumes, parchment rolls, academic papers, and relics of centuries-old scholarship. Dust motes drifted slowly in the slanted morning light, giving the room the quality of an underwater cathedral. Waiting by a long oak table was Dr. Miriam Vale, her posture stiff, her expression composed yet brittle. Her grey eyes flicked toward Poirot as he approached, though she did not offer a greeting. "Dr. Vale," Poirot said gently, "you sent word you had something of importance to discuss." Her fingers tightened around the spine of a heavy book. "Yes, but I want one thing perfectly clear, Monsieur Poirot. I had no quarrel with Lionel Ashcroft that would ever justify such a thing." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "And yet you argued yesterday." She hesitated. "Academics always argue." Poirot gave a small smile, but not always with such passion that students mention it to the inspector. Silence stretched between them like a pulled thread. Finally, she exhaled. Defeated, Ashcroft discovered something. Something significant. Something he refused to share with me, despite the fact that we were supposed to be collaborating. Poirot studied her carefully. The discovery found in the sealed manuscripts? Her eyes flickered. "You already know." Poirot inclined his head modestly. "I know only that the professor believed his research was dangerous, that it challenged an established narrative." She stepped closer, lowering her voice, because it was never meant to be found. From beneath the table, she drew a small lacquered box. Poirot recognized it at once. It was the type used by the university to store restricted materials. She unlocked it with a delicate silver key. Inside lay a bundle of parchment pages tied neatly with cord, stained, brittle, centuries old. "A lost treatise," she whispered, "written by a 15th-century scholar named Aldwin Rooke, a man rumoured to have been executed for heresy." Poirot frowned. "Heresy of a theological nature?" "No." Her lips tightened. "Historical." She handed him the parchment. Poirot examined it carefully. The ink had faded, but the script remained legible, a flowing medieval hand. In the margins were symbols, diagrams, and annotations. But what caught Poirot's eye was one line near the top of the first page. "The truth beneath the stones must never be revealed, for knowledge is a blade sharp enough to sever kingdoms." Poirot felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold room. "What truth?" he murmured. Dr. Vale shook her head. "We don't know. The text ends abruptly. The rest of the manuscript is missing, likely torn out centuries ago. Ashcroft believed someone hid those pages somewhere within the college grounds." Poirot looked up sharply. "And last night, did he believe he had found them?" Her throat tightened. "Yes, he told me he had, and that he feared the implications." She swallowed. "He said he would unveil everything during his lecture." Poirot closed the box, and someone ensured that he never would. A silence thick with dread settled over them. Vale turned away, walking toward the towering shelves. "I searched the archive this morning. Something is wrong, Poirot. Something is missing." Poirot followed her gaze. The archive room seemed undisturbed, but Poirot sensed it immediately. The subtle displacement of air, the faint scuff on the floor, the skewed angle of a ladder that should have been neatly stowed. He approached the tall, rolling ladder. "This was used recently," he said, "yet there is no dust on the top rungs, only near the bottom." Vale looked startled, meaning the person climbed part way, but not all the way to the top. Poirot nodded, because they were not searching the upper shelves. He knelt beside the ladder and inspected the floorboards. A faint indentation, a tiny circular mark, marred the wood. Poirot's eyes brightened with recognition. "The same mark I found beneath the lectern," he whispered. A metallic device. Something small, affixed and later removed. "Dr. Vale," Poirot said, rising, "what exactly was stored in this section of the archive?" She walked to a shelf marked Early Tudor relics and records. The spines were dusty, untouched for years, except for 2 spaces near the bottom where the dust had been brushed away. "These shelves contain estate documents," Vale murmured. "Maps, land transfers." She knelt. "Some of these boxes hold old architectural plans of the college." Poirot felt his pulse tighten. "Architectural plans," he repeated, "including perhaps sealed rooms, hidden chambers, foundations." Vale's eyes widened. "Yes." Poirot stepped back, gazing at the shelves as though seeing them for the first time. The chalkboard message. Truth beneath. Foundation. Something beneath the college itself. Something someone would kill to keep hidden. A rustling sound broke the silence. Poirot turned sharply. At the far end of the archive, a shadow moved, swift, deliberate, vanishing behind a towering shelf. Vale gasped softly. Poirot's jaw tightened. "Stay here," he said. He advanced, footsteps soundless on the old wood. The air felt heavier, as though holding its breath. He rounded the corner between shelves and saw nothing. Just a narrow aisle, books towering on either side, dust floating gently in the amber light. Poirot frowned. Then, there. A faint disturbance in the dust on the floor. A footprint, barely visible, but unmistakably recent. Not Vale's, not his. He followed the prints deeper into the archive. They led toward a small alcove where a single stained glass window cast shards of colour over the floor. And there, half hidden behind an old chest, he found something. A small metal hook. The same shape and size as the one missing from beneath the lectern. Poirot lifted it with delicate fingers. A mechanism, part of the murder device. He tucked it into his pocket. "Monsieur Poirot," Dr. Vale called softly, "did you find—" A sudden sharp crack echoed overhead. Poirot's instincts screamed. "Down!" he shouted. A heavy bookcase trembled violently, then toppled. Poirot lunged forward, grabbing Vale just as the towering shelf came crashing down where she had stood moments before. Books exploded outward, a roar of wood and paper filling the room like thunder. The air grew thick with dust. When the noise finally died, Vale clung to Poirot, trembling. It was going to fall on me," she whispered. Poirot's voice was calm but cold. "No, it was pushed." He looked upward. High on the balcony walkway above the archive, a figure slipped through a doorway and vanished. Another attempt, another warning, or perhaps another murder that had narrowly failed. Poirot helped Vale steady herself. "Dr. Vale," he said quietly, "someone fears what you know. what you and the professor discovered." Vale nodded shakily. "They want to destroy the manuscript, and anyone connected to it." Poirot's eyes hardened like steel. "Then, madame, we must act swiftly. The truth hides beneath the stones of this old university, and someone will kill to keep those stones unturned." He looked toward the doorway where the figure had escaped. "And Hercule Poirot," he said softly, "does not take kindly to murderers who hide in the shadows." The archive's silence returned slowly, but now it felt charged, alive with secrets waiting to ignite. Chapter 4. The Scholar Who Lied. By afternoon, the storm clouds had settled low and heavy over Cambridge, casting a sombre gloom across the college. The fog had lifted slightly, revealing the moss-slick stones and narrow pathways that wound between the ancient buildings, but an oppressive stillness lingered in the air. Hercule Poirot walked with careful steps toward the senior common room, where he had arranged a meeting with Dr. Edwin Clarke, a historian known for his quiet brilliance, and his rivalry with Professor Lionel Ashcroft. The room was warm, lit by a crackling fire in the hearth and filled with the rich scent of tobacco and old paper. Tall windows framed the grey sky, their glass rattling faintly with the low rumble of distant thunder. Clarke sat by the fire, his legs crossed neatly, a teacup balanced in his slender fingers. His eyes were sharp behind round spectacles, and his expression carried the perpetual air of mild irritation, as if the world often failed to meet his standards. "Ah, Monsieur Poirot." Clarke rose, though only barely. "I assume you're here to probe the mysteries of poor Lionel's demise." Poirot removed his hat and gloves, carefully placing them on a side table. "I am here, Dr. Clarke, to understand the truth, and truth, I find, often hides behind academic rivalry." Clarke sniffed. "I suppose Inspector Jameson told you we had disagreements. Quite tedious of him." Poirot smiled softly. "It was not the inspector. It was your own tone when you said 'poor Lionel,' as though sympathy were a coat you had donned for the occasion." Clarke bristled but recovered quickly. "Ashcroft was brilliant when he wasn't being unbearably arrogant. He believed himself the heir to every great historian in England." He sipped his tea. "Does that make me a murderer, Poirot?" "No, but it may make you a man who feared being overshadowed." The fire crackled. Clarke's jaw tightened by a fraction. Poirot sat across from him. "Tell me, Dr. Clarke, what do you know of the lost manuscript of Aldwyn Rook?" Clarke's cup paused mid-air. His eyes narrowed. "I know it is a myth perpetuated by romantics. No real historian credits such nonsense." Poirot watched him closely. "What if I told you that the manuscript exists, and that Professor Ashcroft found evidence of its source?" Clarke's face remained composed. Too composed. "That would make Lionel either a genius," Clarke said slowly, "or a fool, and I am inclined to think the latter." Poirot leaned in slightly. "Dr. Clarke, the manuscript speaks of a truth buried beneath the college, a truth that could alter centuries of English history." Clarke's lips curled faintly. "History does not bend so easily, monsieur." Poirot did not look away. Yet someone feared that Ashcroft's discovery might bend it quite dangerously. A flicker, barely perceptible, crossed Clarke's eyes. "It appears," Clarke said after a pause, "that your imagination is more suited to fiction than scholarship." Poirot rose. "Perhaps, but fiction often reveals the truths people hide." He walked toward the window, examining the raindrops collecting on the glass. From the reflection, he saw Clarke watching him warily. "Tell me," Poirot said quietly, Where were you last night at the time of the professor's final preparation? Clark adjusted his glasses. In my rooms, working, alone. No witnesses. No. Clark's tone sharpened. Should I produce a signed affidavit from the moon? Poirot turned. Non, mon ami, but you should produce honesty. Clark set down his teacup with a sharp clink. If you believe I murdered Lionel over research, you are wasting your time and insulting my intelligence. Poirot gave a courteous bow. Merci, Dr. Clark. Your intelligence remains uninsulted. He moved toward the door, but paused with his hand on the knob. One last question, Poirot said. Professor Ashcroft spoke to several colleagues about a recent argument he had with you. Clark stiffened. We argued because he refused to share his notes. He claimed they were incomplete, that he needed one final piece. And did you know what that piece was? Clark hesitated. Then, no, Lionel was secretive. Poirot's eyes glimmered. And you, Dr. Clark, are a very poor liar. Clark's composure finally cracked. He shot to his feet. I did not kill him. Poirot nodded. Perhaps not. But you know more than you pretend, and if you are not careful, your secrets will reveal themselves long before I uncover them. He left the room, closing the door softly behind him. Poirot walked back into the dim corridor, mind racing with the subtle signs Clark had betrayed. The twitch of his fingers, the sharpened tone, the way he avoided looking directly at the window when the manuscript was mentioned. But Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by quick footsteps. He turned just as a young man nearly collided with him. "Sorry, sir," the student gasped. He was flushed, breathing hard. "Are you Monsieur Poirot?" Poirot straightened. "I am he, yes." The student thrust a folded note into his hand. "This was left in my pigeonhole, addressed to you, from someone calling themselves a friend." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "A dangerous title." The student nodded nervously and hurried away. Poirot unfolded the paper. The handwriting was jagged, hurried. "Stop asking about the foundation. The stones should stay buried, or you will join Ashcroft." Poirot's gaze hardened. The hall's dim lanterns flickered, as though stirred by an unseen breath. Someone was watching. Someone who knew the truth about the foundation beneath the college. Someone who believed that murder was a necessary tool to keep history silent. Poirot folded the note and tucked it carefully into his coat. "Bon," he murmured. "Then the game continues." He walked onward, his little steps sharp and determined upon the stones. Somewhere in these ancient halls, a murderer hid behind scholarship, tradition, and the thick dust of history. But Poirot had seen enough lies to recognize fear when it appeared behind polite scholarly smiles. And fear, unlike lies, was very difficult to hide. Chapter 5. How the porter's midnight secret night had fallen once more over Cambridge. The ivy-covered walls of St. Anselm College shrouded in a heavy curtain of darkness. Only the faint glow of lanterns guided Hercule Poirot as he crossed the inner courtyard, his cane tapping lightly on the damp cobblestones. The cold air smelled of rain and old stone, a scent the detective had come to associate with secrets long buried. He was on his way to interview Thomas Griggs, the college's senior porter. It was Griggs who had discovered Professor Ashcroft's body, and Poirot sensed from the man's nervous manner that he had not told the whole story. Griggs lived in a narrow stone lodge by the main gate. A single lamp burned in the window, flickering weakly against the wind. Poirot knocked. After a moment, the door creaked open, revealing Griggs, balding, stooped, and wrapped in a thick woolen sweater. His eyes darted anxiously along the corridor behind Poirot. "Monsieur Poirot!" he whispered. "Come in quickly." Poirot stepped inside. The room was cramped but warm, filled with the scent of tea, pipe smoke, and old books. A kettle hissed on the stove. Griggs shut the door with trembling hands. "Sir, I was hoping you'd come. I have something I need to say. Something I should have said before." Poirot nodded gently. "Then let us speak with honesty, Monsieur Griggs. Sit, take breath, begin at the beginning." Griggs sank into an armchair, rubbing his hands together as though trying to dispel a chill that had settled deep within him. "It was late," he began. "Past 10 o'clock. I was doing my rounds. Routine, you understand. Checking the lecture halls, making sure no students were snooping where they shouldn't. And as I passed the Hawthorne Hall, I heard something." Poirot leaned forward. "What sort of something?" "A voice," Griggs whispered. "Arguing. 2 voices, actually." His brow furrowed. "One was the professor. I'd know his voice anywhere. The other, I couldn't place it. Could have been male or female. The echo was so strange." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "And what were they arguing about?" Griggs swallowed. "The professor kept saying, 'You don't understand the danger,' and the other voice kept insisting, 'Then it must never be revealed.'" Silence filled the room. Poirot tapped a finger lightly on his knee. "And after the argument?" Griggs closed his eyes. "I heard something fall, something heavy, then footsteps running out of the hall." Poirot's voice softened. "You saw the person?" Griggs shook his head. "No, it was too dark. But I heard them, running fast, and they went toward the old cloisters." Poirot considered this. "Why did you not tell Inspector Jameson?" Griggs looked ashamed. Because I was scared, sir. When I found the professor's body, I knew it wasn't natural. And then I got this." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out small folded note. Poirot opened it. The message was written in the same jagged hand as the threat he had received earlier. "Stay silent. The college remembers." Poirot felt a cold weight settle over the room. "So," Poirot said softly, "the murderer has friends, or accomplices, or at least watchers." Griggs nodded. "I don't want trouble, Monsieur Poirot. I've served this college 37 years, but something foul is happening in these walls." Poirot clasped his hands. "Monsieur Griggs, this note, the argument, the footsteps, these are not troubles you bring. They are truths, and truth, no matter how much people fear it, must be spoken." Griggs exhaled shakily. "There's more?" Poirot raised an eyebrow. "More," the porter nodded. "On the night the professor died, someone else came through the gate very late, past midnight. I saw them on the security ledger this morning, and it bothered me." He rose and retrieved a thick logbook from a shelf. "This is the register of everyone who enters after hours," Griggs explained. "Students, staff, guests, everyone must sign." He handed the open book to Poirot and pointed at an entry. 11:47 p.m. Dr. Edwin Clark. Poirot's moustache lifted in a displeased arc. "Ah, Dr. Clark. Who told me he was in his rooms all night?" Poirot's voice cooled. "A lie most elegant in its simplicity." Griggs swallowed nervously. "He came through the gate with his coat pulled tight and his hat low. Didn't speak to me, just signed and hurried off." Poirot studied the signature, a bit shakier than Clark's usual handwriting, as though the man had been startled or rushed. "And where did Dr. Clark go?" Poirot asked. "I followed him with my eyes until he turned toward the old cloisters," Griggs replied. Same direction the unknown person ran. Poirot closed the ledger with deliberate care. "Merci, Monsieur Griggs. What you have told me is of great importance, but I ask one favour more." He stood. "If anyone threatens you again, do not hide. Come directly to me." For the danger is not in truth, but in silence. Griggs nodded gratefully, though fear still lingered in his eyes. Poirot stepped outside into the night. Rain had begun to fall lightly, pattering across the stones. The wind moaned through the cloisters, carrying the scent of damp mortar and something else, old, earthy, secretive. Poirot walked beneath the dark arches, his footsteps echoing softly. He paused near the stone well at the cloister's centre, where ivy drooped like curtains. The air hummed with a strange tension. Here, someone had waited. Here, someone had watched Ashcroft die. Poirot knelt, studying the ground. The faint outline of a footprint remained in the soft soil. A distinctive heel, narrow, elegant, not Clark's, not Griggs's. Someone else had stood here. Poirot rose slowly, rain sliding down his coat. "Ah," he whispered, "the circle tightens." Lightning flickered across the sky, illuminating the cloisters in a flash of white. Poirot's eyes narrowed toward the dark archway leading into the depths of the college. Someone had lied. Someone had returned. And someone feared the truth beneath the stones of St. Anselm. The little grey cells stirred fiercely. Tomorrow he would confront Dr. Clark. Tonight he would think. Chapter 6. The Chamber Beneath the Stones. Dawn broke reluctantly over Cambridge, the sky pale and washed of colour, as though exhausted by the mysteries of the night before. Hercule Poirot walked through the courtyard with unusual urgency, his coat brushing the frosted grass and his cane tapping briskly. The chill nipped at his ears, but Poirot felt only the heat of anticipation. For today he intended to examine the one place that had recurred through every whisper, every clue, every threat. The foundation beneath St. Anselm College. Professor Ashcroft's notes had referenced it. Dr. Vale had hinted at it. The anonymous threats warned him away from it. And the murderer, Poirot sensed, was tied to it. He entered the college record office, a narrow building tucked between two lecture halls. Inside, shelves held centuries of plans, maps, and structural diagrams. The musty smell of old vellum greeted him as he lit a lamp and began his search. Moments later, the door swung open. "Poirot!" Inspector Jameson strode in, his breath fogging in the cold air. "What are you doing in here at this hour?" Poirot raised an eyebrow. "Research, Inspector. You should try it sometime." Jameson opened his mouth, then closed it again. "Dr. Vale said you were looking for architectural plans." "Correct," Poirot said. "Here they are." He laid out 3 yellowed diagrams on the table. An original blueprint from 1526, a revised plan from 1780, and the modern survey from 1903. Jameson leaned closer. "They look different." "More than different," Poirot murmured. "Contradictory." Poirot tapped the oldest plan. "Here, beneath the cloisters, is marked a small chamber." He tapped the second plan. "Here, the chamber is enlarged but sealed." Then the third. "And here, it is gone entirely." "Removed?" Jameson asked. Poirot shook his head sharply. "Non, mon ami. One does not simply erase centuries of stone. The chamber still exists." Jameson frowned. "So why remove it from the plans?" Poirot looked up. "Because what is hidden is often dangerous." He leaned over the table, tracing the lines with a gloved finger. "The entrance," Poirot whispered, "should be beneath the old stone well in the cloister." Jameson's eyebrows shot up. "The same place you were last night?" "Exactly." A gust of wind rattled the window. Outside, students hurried to morning lectures, unaware that the ground beneath them held a secret tied to murder. Jameson scratched his head. "So what do you think is down there?" Poirot folded the plans, neatly. Something an academic might kill to protect or to obtain. The cloisters were nearly empty when Poirot and Jameson arrived, quiet save for the hollow echo of their steps beneath the pale arches. The stone well stood at the centre, its carved rim slick with dew. Poirot approached it, the cold mist brushing his face. "Look here, Inspector." Along the inside rim, nearly invisible, were faint vertical scratches. Fresh, purposeful, too regular to be weathering. "Someone moved the lid," Poirot said. Jameson exhaled sharply. "Dear God, you think someone went down there?" Poirot nodded, and perhaps returned. He gestured for Jameson to help. Together they heaved the heavy stone cover aside with great effort, revealing a circular opening leading down into darkness. A narrow iron ladder descended into the depths. Jameson peered into the void. "This is madness," Poirot replied calmly. "Madness, perhaps, but necessary." He lowered himself onto the ladder. Jameson grumbled but followed. The descent was steep and cold. The walls were damp stone, rough and ancient, smelling of mould and earth. The only sound was the drip of water echoing into the abyss. After several minutes, Poirot stepped into a small subterranean chamber. Jameson landed beside him. "Bloody hell!" The chamber was larger than expected, roughly circular, with vaulted ceilings supported by thick stone ribs. Tapestries, long decayed, hung in tatters from rusted hooks. Wooden crates lined one wall, half rotted. And in the centre lay a stone pedestal, cracked but intact. On the pedestal rested a sealed leather folio. Poirot approached slowly. Dust coated the folio, but the leather was intact, old, yes, but not medieval. It was 19th century. "Ashcroft did not find the original manuscript," Poirot murmured. "He found this, someone else's notes on it." Jameson ran a hand along the chamber wall. "But who would hide it down here?" Poirot opened the folio. Inside were handwritten pages, careful, meticulous, signed with initials at the bottom of each page. "E.C." Jameson's eyes widened. "Clark?" Poirot nodded solemnly. "Dr. Edwin Clark. He found these notes years ago. He has been studying Aldwyn Rook's forbidden history in secret." Poirot skimmed the pages, reading aloud, "The foundation of St. Anselm hides the truth of the succession dispute, a truth that could alter the line of kings." Jameson let out a low whistle. "Historical dynamite." "But dangerous dynamite," Poirot said. "If Ashcroft discovered Clark's work, or if he discovered the missing pages elsewhere, then Clark would have reason to silence him." Jameson clenched his jaw. "And Clark lied about his alibi." Poirot nodded. "Oui, he lied, but—" He moved deeper into the chamber, his penlight scanning the floor. Then he stopped. "Inspector," he whispered. There, in the thin layer of dust, were two sets of footprints, one larger, one smaller, leading toward a narrow passageway at the back of the chamber. Jameson's face tightened. "Someone else came down here." Poirot followed the prints until they vanished into darkness. The passage twisted ahead, disappearing into shadow. Poirot turned back. "Dr. Clark is hiding something," Poirot said quietly, "but he may not be the only one." Jameson stared around the eerie chamber. "Are you saying more than one person knew about this?" "Oui," Poirot said. "I fear this secret may be older, deeper, and more dangerous than murder." He gathered the folio. "We will confront Dr. Clark, but tonight we watch. Someone will return here. The murderer must ensure the truth stays buried." Poirot looked back into the darkness of the ancient passage. "And Hercule Poirot," he murmured, "will be waiting." Chapter 7. The Scholar in Shadows. The afternoon light slanted through the tall windows of Dr. Edwin Clark's office, painting thin golden stripes across the stacks of books and parchment. The air smelled faintly of pipe tobacco and aged vellum, a scholar's den that whispered of secrets. On the far wall hung portraits of former deans, stern, powdered faces glaring at the present with disapproval. Hercule Poirot stood in the doorway, gloved hands clasped behind his back. "Dr. Clark," he announced softly. Clark looked up from his desk with a start. He was pale today, too pale, and his customary poise had fractured into something brittle. "Monsieur Poirot," he managed, "you gave me no notice." Poirot entered without invitation, Inspector Jameson stepping in behind him like a silent shadow. "I find," Poirot said, "that notices are necessary when one is visiting a man who has something to hide." Clark stiffened. "I beg your pardon." Poirot lifted a slim leather folio and placed it gently on Clark's desk. "I believe this belongs to you." Clark's breath caught. His eyes darted from the folio to Poirot, then to Jameson, then back again. "Where did you—" "In the chamber beneath the cloisters," Poirot said. The room seemed to shrink around Clark. His hands trembled. Jameson stepped forward. "Dr. Clark, this is your handwriting. We know you concealed these notes. We know you've been researching Aldwyn Rook's history for years." Clark's lips moved, but no words came. Poirot leaned forward. "Professor Ashcroft also sought the truth," Poirot said gently. "He found missing pieces of the manuscript that you had not seen." Clark swallowed. Are you saying I killed him?" Poirot did not answer. He allowed the silence to stretch, to press upon Clark like a tightening vice. Clark's shoulders sagged. "I did not harm Marcus, I swear it. Yet you lied about your whereabouts," Jameson snapped. Clark closed his eyes. "Because I feared this exact moment, because I knew how it would appear." Poirot circled the room, scanning the shelves lined with medieval treatises and annotated folios. Clark watched him with a haunted expression. "Please," Clark said quietly, "you must understand. Ashcroft and I were rivals, yes, but in scholarship, not malice." Poirot paused. "Then tell me, Dr. Clark, what happened between you and Ashcroft 3 months ago? The quarrel in the senior common room?" Clark flinched. "You heard of that?" "I hear many things," Poirot said. Clark rubbed his temples, then began to speak, the words spilling out with reluctant candour. Ashcroft discovered the existence of a missing codex, a set of pages torn from the original Rook manuscript centuries ago. He believed they contained the true line of succession following the Norman era. I believed the codex to be a myth. But when he showed me a fragment, a genuine medieval scrap, I realized he might be right. His voice grew distant. I went to the chamber beneath the cloisters. I had theorized its existence for years, but I had never found the entrance. Ashcroft must have located the original door and forced entry. He left the folio for me, deliberately, I suspect. Poirot narrowed his eyes. "But why leave it untouched? Why hide your own research there?" Clark hesitated. "Because the college council forbade further investigation. They deemed the legend inflammatory, dangerous. I feared losing my position." "And Ashcroft?" Poirot asked. Clark looked away. "He wished to publish." Jameson grunted. "So you had motive?" Clark slammed a fist onto his desk. "No, I argued with him, yes. I begged him to wait, to allow me time to corroborate the claims. But Marcus was reckless, brilliant, but reckless. He would have upended centuries of accepted history on a hunch." Poirot studied him. "You cared for him?" Clark nodded miserably. "He was my friend." For the first time, Clark's defences seemed to crumble entirely. Poirot exchanged a glance with Jameson. This emotion did not feel performative. Poirot spoke softly. Dr. Clark, someone threatened Ashcroft. Someone warned him off the manuscript. Those threats were not from you." Clark's eyes widened. "No, never." Poirot turned toward the office door. "Then tell me this. Who else knew of the chamber? Who else knew Ashcroft was close to uncovering the truth?" Clark hesitated. Too long. Poirot spun back sharply. "Ah, you do know!" Clark's face tightened. "Monsieur Poirot, you must tread carefully. This is not an ordinary academic dispute." Jameson stepped forward. "Clark, if you are protecting someone—" Clark raised a trembling hand. "I fear I may be, but not willingly." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Speak plainly." Clark took a ragged breath. 2 months ago, I was visited by someone from the college's governing body. Someone very influential. They questioned my research, warned me that delving into the manuscript's history might end my career, might end more than that. Poirot's pulse quickened. "A member of the council." Clark nodded. "Name," Jameson demanded. Clark shook his head, fear overtaking him. "I dare not." Poirot leaned in, voice low and fierce. "Dr. Clark, a man has been murdered. You owe him the truth." Clark's voice was barely above a whisper. "The one who threatened us was Dean Harrington." Jameson swore under his breath. Poirot felt the room tilt slightly. The Dean, with his impeccable manners and guarded politeness. The Dean who spoke so fondly of Ashcroft yet offered few details. The Dean who had access to every key and every archive. "It makes sense," Jameson said. "He controls the college's reputation. He'd do anything to protect it." Poirot raised a hand. "Non, let us not jump too quickly. Clark, what exactly did the Dean tell you?" Clark spoke, voice hollow. That the truth buried within the manuscript would destroy the college's legacy forever. That old secrets were meant to remain sealed. Poirot nodded slowly, absorbing the enormity of the admission. "You believe the Dean killed Ashcroft?" Clark shook his head. "I do not know, but I know he feared what Ashcroft had uncovered." Poirot closed the folio gently. "Then we must speak with the Dean." Jameson was already moving toward the door, but Poirot raised a hand to stop him. "No, Inspector, not yet." Jameson frowned. "Why not?" Poirot's eyes gleamed with cold intelligence. "Because Dean Harrington is a man accustomed to power. If he senses we suspect him, he will bury what remains of the truth. No, first we must confirm whether he had opportunity, whether he was near Ashcroft on the night of the murder." Poirot turned to Clark. "Dr. Clark, you have helped us more than you realize, but for your own safety, you must tell no one of this conversation." Clark nodded shakily. What will you do now?" Poirot walked to the door. "I will do," he said softly, "what Hercule Poirot always does." He paused, eyes sharp as blades. "I will observe, and I will wait for the murderer to make a mistake." Chapter 8. The Dean's Quiet Dominion. The winter dusk descended quickly over Cambridge, washing the college grounds in a sombre violet hue. The lamps flickered to life one by one, casting long, wavering shadows that pooled beneath the archways. Students hurried indoors, their laughter echoing faintly before disappearing into warm halls. But Hercule Poirot had no such comfort tonight. He stood outside the Dean's residence, a grand but austere building at the eastern end of the quadrangle. Its dark oak facade rose like a silent sentinel, windows gleaming with the faint glow of academic privilege. Poirot had observed it for nearly 20 minutes, noting every curtain twitch, every footstep behind the glass. Still no sign of the Dean. Inspector Jameson paced nearby, his collar turned up, against the cold. "Are you sure he's inside?" he muttered. Poirot gave a small shrug. "I do not know, Inspector. But one learns much by watching who comes and who goes." Jameson blew into his hands. "I'd prefer watching from inside. Warmer in there." Poirot ignored him. His eyes remained fixed on the entryway. At last, the heavy door creaked open. Dean Lawrence Harrington emerged, impeccably dressed as always. Charcoal coat, silver cufflinks gleaming in the lantern light, his posture upright and commanding. His expression, however, was uncharacteristically strained, pulled tight, as though the weight of something unspoken pressed upon him. Poirot stepped forward. "Bonsoir, Dean Harrington." The Dean startled, then composed himself instantly. "Monsieur Poirot, Inspector Jameson, what brings you both lurking outside my residence?" Poirot smiled lightly. "We lurk, yes. It is a habit of detectives." Jameson shot Poirot a glare. Poirot ignored it. The Dean glanced between them, suspicion flickering in his eyes. "If you have questions, you may as well ask them indoors." Poirot bowed his head politely. "Merci. Your hospitality is appreciated." They followed Harrington through the door into a richly furnished study. Shelves of leather-bound tomes lined the walls. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting warm flickers across polished wood floors. The Dean gestured for them to sit, though the offer carried no warmth. Jameson wasted no time. "Dean Harrington, we need to confirm your whereabouts on the night Professor Ashcroft died." The room seemed to still. Harrington's jaw tightened. "You tread close to insult, Inspector. I was here, in my home, preparing the agenda for the next council meeting." "So you were alone," Jameson said pointedly. The Dean's gaze sharpened. "Yes, alone." Poirot tilted his head. "You left the college premises only once that day, at 9:15 to fetch documents from the chapel archive. You returned 20 minutes later." Harrington blinked. "You had me watched?" Poirot smiled mildly. "One must always observe, n'est-ce pas?" Jameson leaned forward. "Why go to the archive that late?" Harrington stiffened. "I needed records relating to Ashcroft's manuscript proposal. The council intended to reject it." Poirot tapped his fingers together. "You opposed his research?" Harrington sighed. "Monsieur Poirot, Ashcroft was brilliant, no one denies that. But his determination to publish unverified claims about the succession crisis would have ignited academic uproar. We have donors, legacies, centuries of scholarly prestige to protect." Poirot's voice was soft. "Prestige or secrecy?" The Dean's fingers twitched ever so slightly. Poirot noted it. Jameson pressed on. "Did you ever threaten Ashcroft? Warn him to stop?" Harrington's eyes flashed with indignation. "Absolutely not. I voiced concerns, yes, but threats? Never." Poirot lifted the folio Clark had surrendered. "And what of these notes? Dr. Clark claims you threatened him." The Dean's face drained of colour. For a moment, the authoritative mask slipped, revealing a man deeply unsettled. Poirot watched every micro-expression, every tremor. "You spoke to Clark 2 months ago," Poirot continued quietly. "You warned him his research was dangerous." Harrington swallowed hard. "I only advised caution. The college has endured 5 centuries. It cannot be shaken by speculative theories." Poirot raised a brow. "Speculative or accurate?" The Dean hesitated, and in that hesitation, Poirot found suspicion blooming like frost. Harrington leaned back, hands clasped tightly. "You are reading too much into this." Poirot did not respond. He simply waited. And the Dean, under that silence, cracked further. "You must understand," he began. "Certain historical matters were sealed intentionally. Not by me, but by the founders. Some truths serve no purpose except to destabilize." Poirot eyed him sharply. "So there is truth hidden in the manuscript." Harrington closed his eyes for a moment. There are implications, dangerous ones. Jameson stepped forward. Dean Harrington, did you kill Professor Ashcroft to protect the college's reputation? Harrington rose, outrage blazing across his features. No, I would never harm Marcus. I disagreed with him, yes, but kill him, that is unthinkable. Poirot rose as well, his voice low and deliberate. Yet your fear of the manuscript's contents is undeniable, and fear, mon ami, makes men act irrationally. Silence flooded the room. At last, the Dean spoke, voice trembling. I am not your murderer, but... His expression darkened with dread. You should know this. I was not the only member of the council concerned about the manuscript. Poirot's eyes glinted. Ah, others. Harrington nodded slowly. Yes, one in particular. Someone who believed Marcus Ashcroft's discovery could ruin everything. Who? Jameson demanded. The Dean's voice dropped to a whisper. Dr. Margaret Vale. Poirot stiffened. The brilliant historian. The one who had guided Ashcroft. The one whose quiet elegance masked a steel intellect. The one who had been first on the scene the night of the murder. Jameson stared. Vale, but she said she supported Ashcroft, shared his research, trusted him. Harrington shook his head. She trusted no one. Vale is the only scholar who knew more about the manuscript's origins than Ashcroft himself. Poirot stepped closer to the Dean. And did you see her the night Ashcroft died? Harrington opened his mouth, then froze. Every drop of colour drained from his face. Poirot whispered, Dean, did you? The Dean slowly nodded. Yes, I saw her leaving the chapel, minutes before the bell rang and the alarm was raised. Poirot felt the world sharpen around him. So Dr. Margaret, Vale had lied. Chapter 9. The Historian's Midnight Secret. The evening fog rolled across the courtyard like a living thing, coiling through the archways and softening the lamplight into pale halos. Hercule Poirot walked with purpose, his polished shoes tapping sharply on the flagstones. Inspector Jameson hurried beside him, his breath steaming in the cold air. She lied to us, Jameson muttered. Vale lied about where she was. If Harrington saw her leaving the chapel... Poirot raised a hand. Patience, Inspector. Lies do not always conceal guilt. Sometimes they protect something else. Jameson frowned. Like what? Poirot smiled faintly. Ah, if I knew that already, I would be enjoying a comfortable chair, a cup of chocolate chord, and the warmth of a roaring fire. They reached the west wing of St. Anselm College, the scholars' hallway. Dr. Margaret Vale's office door stood slightly ajar, a sliver of golden light spilling into the corridor. Even at this late hour, she worked. Poirot knocked gently. Dr. Vale? Her voice answered, cool and crisp. Enter. The office was elegant but severe. Dark oak shelves, meticulous stacks of manuscripts, and a single reading lamp casting a halo of amber warmth. Dr. Vale sat behind her desk, her posture a perfect line of composure. Not a hair of her silver-streaked bun was out of place. Poirot, she said. Inspector, you both look troubled. Poirot bowed. We come with questions, difficult ones. A shadow flickered across her face, but she gestured to 2 chairs. Then sit, ask. Poirot did not sit. Dean Harrington saw you leaving the chapel on the night Professor Ashcroft died. Silence. A long, brittle silence. Jameson stepped forward. You told us you were in your rooms all evening. Dr. Vale closed her eyes, briefly, a flicker of exhaustion, and then met their gaze with steady resolve. Yes, she said, I lied. Jameson exhaled in triumph. So you were there, at the scene. Her eyes flashed with irritation. Inspector, Being near the chapel does not make me a murderer." Poirot observed her closely. "Then why lie?" Dr. Vale folded her hands. Her voice softened, not defensive, but resigned, "Because I feared the truth would be misunderstood. I feared you would seize upon it as you now have, without context. Then provide the context," Poirot said gently. Dr. Vale rose from her chair and walked toward the window. The fog billowed outside like drifting smoke. "I went to the chapel," she said, "to meet Marcus." Jameson stiffened. "Ashcroft? You planned to meet him?" "Yes. He sent me a message, slipped under my door. He said he had found something urgent, something dangerous." She paused. "He asked me to come alone." Poirot's brow arched slightly. "And yet you told no one." "Would you?" she whispered, "if a colleague you cared for begged for secrecy?" Poirot studied her face, the tension around the eyes, the heaviness in her voice. There was grief there, genuine and unmasked. "You cared for him deeply," Poirot said quietly. A hollow laugh escaped her. "More than I realized until he was gone." Jameson crossed his arms. "You went to the chapel. You were alone. And Ashcroft was found dead minutes later. That's quite a coincidence." "A coincidence," she said sharply, "is not proof." Poirot stepped forward. "What happened when you arrived?" Dr. Vale turned back to the window, her silhouette cast in gold and shadow. "I found the door unlocked. The chapel was dark except for the lamp Marcus always used when reading old manuscripts. The manuscript case was open, but Marcus was not there." Poirot's ears pricked. "Not there? No. I waited several minutes. I even called his name. Silence." Her eyes narrowed with memory. It felt wrong, as if someone else had already been there. "Footsteps?" Poirot asked. She shook her head. "No, only the cold, a strange cold." Jameson frowned. "What did you do next?" "I left. Marcus had a habit of wandering when deep in thought. I assumed he had stepped out. I returned to my rooms." Her voice cracked. "I never imagined he was already dead." Poirot watched her closely. "And the message he left you? You still have it?" She hesitated, then opened a drawer and handed Poirot a small folded slip of parchment. Poirot examined it. The handwriting was hurried, unlike Ashcroft's usual elegant script. "Margaret, come to the chapel at 10. I have found the missing key. Do not tell anyone." Poirot felt a chill race down his spine. The missing key! The phrase echoed with significance. Jameson peered over his shoulder. "What key?" Dr. Vale answered softly. "The key to understanding Aldwyn Rook's original manuscript. Marcus believed a cipher existed, a code to interpret the lost succession pages." Poirot tapped the note lightly. "If Ashcroft truly solved the cipher, then someone else may have learned of it," Vale finished. "Someone who feared the truth." Poirot returned the note. "You should have shown us this earlier." "I feared becoming your primary suspect," she said simply. Jameson muttered something under his breath. Poirot folded his arms, thinking. "You were first to find the body," he said. "Why?" "I was returning from the library. I heard the bell. I ran." Poirot paced slowly. "Very well. You lied about your movements, but I sense you did not kill him. Still, your concealment serves another." Dr. Vale's eyes flickered with unease. "Another? Someone who wanted to divert suspicion. Someone who knew you met Ashcroft secretly." She paled. "Are you suggesting someone watched me?" Poirot nodded slowly. "Watched both of you." Jameson exhaled. "Dean Harrington." Poirot shook his head. "No! Harrington may have lied about some matters, but he is not nimble enough for murder in the dark. No, someone more subtle. Someone who moves invisibly through academic circles." He looked directly into Vale's eyes. "Dr. Vale, Who else knew Ashcroft was working on the cipher? She hesitated. Tell me, Poirot urged quietly. Lives may depend on it. At last she answered. Only one other person. Someone Marcus trusted, then began to fear. Poirot leaned in. A name. Dr. Vale whispered it. Poirot went still. Jameson's breath caught. The name hung in the air like a blade. Lydia Ashcroft. Poirot felt a tremor of revelation. Ashcroft's estranged wife. The brilliant classicist with a reputation for fierce ambition. The woman who had returned to Cambridge only weeks before his death. The woman who had access to his private notes. Dr. Vale swallowed. Marcus told me she wanted the manuscript more than he did. Poirot's voice was barely above a whisper. Madame Ashcroft, the widow. Jameson rubbed his temples. This case keeps twisting itself into knots. Poirot's eyes gleamed with sudden clarity. Non, mon ami. The knots are loosening, and soon the rope will reveal the hands that tied it. Dr. Vale looked at him anxiously. Poirot, what will you do? He straightened his coat. I will speak with Madame Ashcroft, and I will ask her one question she cannot escape. He paused at the door. For the truth, he said softly, is no longer hiding in the shadows. It walks among us. Chapter 10. The Truth Beneath the Stones. The morning sun broke through the lingering fog, casting sharp angles of light across the quadrangle of St. Anselm College. The air was crisp, but still heavy with tension. Hercule Poirot stood in the centre of the senior common room, flanked by Inspector Jameson, Dr. Margaret Vale, and the other principal figures in the investigation. The room was hushed, the assembly of scholars and staff aware that the final reckoning had arrived. Poirot's eyes, small and piercing, swept the room. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, today the truth shall be laid bare. And I beg your patience, for it is a truth hidden in shadows and secrecy. He paused, allowing the room to lean closer to the moment. Professor Lionel Ashcroft was not killed by accident, nor was his death merely the consequence of carelessness. Non! His death was premeditated, executed by one who feared the revelation of knowledge. A small murmur ran through the crowd. Poirot raised a finger. Silence, for even whispers may obscure the truth. He turned to Dr. Margaret Vale. Madame, you are the first to find the body. You met the professor in secret, yes, but not with murderous intent. You acted out of loyalty and concern. Vale's eyes glimmered, a mixture of relief and apprehension. Oui, she said softly. I only sought to protect him. Poirot's gaze shifted. Then who could have acted? Who had both motive and means? He extended a hand toward the door, as though inviting the unseen culprit to reveal themselves. It is not Dean Harrington, whose fear was of scandal rather than death. Nor is it Dr. Clark, whose rivalry with Ashcroft was tempered by conscience. The room grew colder with suspense. Jameson fidgeted, glancing nervously at the assembled faces. Poirot's eyes rested on one woman in particular. His voice dropped, deliberate and commanding. It is someone closer than we suspected. Someone who understood the manuscript, someone with knowledge of both the cipher and the chamber beneath the cloisters. He paused, savouring the stillness. Someone with access to Ashcroft's private notes and an urgent need to keep the past buried. All eyes turned slowly toward Lydia Ashcroft, standing rigid in a corner, her expression pale and controlled. The widow's eyes widened imperceptibly. Poirot advanced a few steps, cane tapping lightly on the floor. Madame Ashcroft, you returned to Cambridge not merely to mourn your husband, you returned to claim what he discovered. Her lips parted, but no sound emerged. Poirot continued. Your ambition was veiled behind grief, but ambition nonetheless. When Marcus discovered the cipher and the location of the hidden chamber, you realized that he could publish and bring to light truths you wished to keep for yourself. Lydia's hand twitched, betraying the calm she tried to maintain. Your knowledge of classical texts, Poirot said, your meticulous study of Rook's manuscript, your ability to move unseen, all point to you. You knew the chamber existed before anyone else. You waited for the night of the lecture to act. Jameson's jaw tightened. You mean she murdered him? Poirot nodded. Oui. She used a mechanism beneath the lectern, the device discovered earlier, to ensure he would fall at the precise moment. Clever, precise, and almost flawless. But she underestimated two things: the observation of Monsieur Griggs and the little grey cells of Hercule Poirot. Lydia's eyes filled with tears, but they were not of sorrow. They were of rage, frustration, and fear. "You cannot prove it," she spat. Poirot's small lips curved. "The proof is in your movements, madame. In the traces you left, the footprints in the chamber beneath the cloisters, the timing of the bell, and your knowledge of the cipher. And most telling, the note you sent to Dr. Vale, urging secrecy. That note betrayed your fear of exposure." Vale's hand went to her mouth, shock evident. Jameson's face darkened. The room seemed to constrict with tension. Poirot leaned on his cane, addressing the widow directly. "You acted out of greed, ambition, and fear. You sought to control history itself, to claim knowledge your husband had discovered. But knowledge is not yours to wield alone." Lydia faltered, then slumped into a chair, finally yielding to the inevitability of her exposure. "I only wanted to preserve his work," she whispered, though the tremor betrayed the falsity. Poirot shook his head gently. "No, you wanted to possess it, control it, and when Marcus threatened that control, you acted decisively and fatally." Jameson stepped forward. "You're under arrest for the murder of Professor Lionel Ashcroft." Lydia's eyes darted toward the door, realizing escape was impossible. The trap had closed, meticulous and inescapable. Poirot's deductions had revealed every hidden step, every concealed motive. Poirot turned to Dr. Vale. "And you, madame, can finally continue your work without fear. You have been loyal and brave." Vale bowed her head slightly. "Merci, Monsieur Poirot." Poirot addressed the assembly, his voice calm, almost serene. "This case, mes amis, has shown us that knowledge can be dangerous, but secrecy is often deadlier. Ambition can cloud judgment, and fear can drive a person to unthinkable acts. Yet truth will always emerge, if one observes carefully enough." He gestured to the chamber beneath the cloisters. "The hidden manuscript, the cipher, and the secrets of centuries, these have caused a death. Let it serve as a reminder that wisdom must be tempered by conscience." The inspector nodded, satisfied that justice would be served. Vale exhaled, relieved that the danger had passed, and Lydia Ashcroft, once poised and commanding, was now quietly led away. Her carefully constructed mask shattered. Poirot lingered for a moment, gazing toward the old stone well above the chamber. The morning light fell softly across the quadrangle, illuminating the arches, the ivy, the cobblestones. Cambridge, ancient and indifferent, seemed unchanged. Yet beneath its stones lay truths that had cost a man his life. Poirot turned to Jameson. "Mon ami, another case closed. But remember, humankind is ever the same. Ambition, greed, fear, these are timeless." Jameson grunted, "And dangerous." Poirot nodded, small hands folded before him. "Oui, but so are the little grey cells, Inspector. So are the little grey cells." As the sunlight grew, Washing the ancient college in gold, Poirot felt a quiet satisfaction. The mystery was resolved, the murderer revealed, and the shadows that had haunted St. Anselm College receded, leaving only the echo of history and the solemn reminder that truth once unearthed could never again be hidden beneath the stones. The case was closed,